Welcome back, my students. Dr. Oogway here, and today I bring you the video 4th from Cerebellum playlist. This video is going to be about structure of cerebellum. Clearly, so let's begin. Structure of cerebellum is homotypical. Homotypical. What do you mean by homotypical? It means uniform throughout. Uniform throughout. So, in while as the structure of cerebrum or cerebral cortex is heterotypical heterotypical cerebrum. So the structure of cerebellum is homotypical. That means it is uniform throughout. We know central nervous system. It means brain and spinal cord. This central nervous system is made up of neurons. Cerebellum is also a part of brain. It's also small brain. It also contains neurons. It contains five types of these neurons. Five types of neurons. What are these types? These types can be remembered by students. Please be good. This is a mnemonic. Clearly, what do you mean by students? It is satellite cells. Satellite cells. P is called Purkinje cells. Purkinje cells. Then we have here the basket cells. Then we have here the Golgi cells. And we have the granular cells. You know, G, it's twice. Granular cells. These four types of cells, stellate, Purkinje, basket, and Golgi cells, these are inhibitory. While as this granular cell, this is an excitatory cell. Excitatory. So the cerebellum, it consists of five types of neurons: stellate cells, Purkinje cells, basket cells, Golgi cells, and we have the granular cells. These four types are all are inhibitory except granular cells, which are excitatory in function. Now we will talk about the layers. These neurons are arranged in layers. Clearly. So this cerebellar cortex contains three layers. I'll show you here. Cerebellar cortex has three layers. One, two, and three. One, two, and three. Clearly, the first layer is the outer molecular layer. Molecular layer. Clearly, the second layer is the intermediate layer. It is also known as Purkinje layer. And the third layer is called the inner granular layer. Clearly, this intermediate layer, it contains Purkinje cells. This outer molecular layer, it contains stellate and basket cells. So it contains stellate cells and basket cells. Clearly, so stellate cells and basket cells in the outer molecular layer. And this inner granular layer, as the name suggests, it contains granular cells, and it also contains Golgi cells. So these Golgi cells and granular cells are arranged in inner granular layer. So this cerebellar cortex has three layers: outer molecular layer, intermediate layer or Purkinje layer, and inner granular layer. So which contains these five types of neurons in different layers. Clearly, so structure of cerebellum continued. So we will draw this diagram. First, we will talk about the Purkinje layer. So we have consider this Purkinje layer. It contains Purkinje cells. So these are the Purkinje cells in blue. These are the Purkinje cells. Clearly, These Purkinje cells, these are flask shaped. Flask shaped. Clearly. Now we will talk about the this layer, that's outer molecular layer. Outer molecular layer. Outer molecular layer. This outer molecular layer, it contains satellite and basket cells. So we'll draw the satellite and the basket cells. So consider this. This is a basket cell, and consider this as satellite cells. Clearly, outer molecular layer contains basket cells and satellite cells. Along with these cells, it also contains dendrites of Purkinje layer. So these are the dendrites of the Purkinje cells. Dendrites of the Purkinje cells. So outer molecular layer, it contains dendrites of the Purkinje cells. It contains satellite cells and basket cells. Clearly. Now we will draw the inner granular layer. This is the inner granular layer. This inner granular layer, it contains Golgi and granular cells. Golgi cells and granular cells. So we'll draw. So this is a Golgi cell, and it also contains granular cell. Granular cell. So inner granular layer, it contains Golgi cells and granular cells. Clearly, along with that, it also contains axons of, these are the axons of Purkinje cells. Of Purkinje cells. Clearly. So this is the structure of the cerebellum, the five neuronal types, and which are arranged in different layers. What are the different layers? Purkinje layer, it contains Purkinje cells, flask shaped cells. Outer molecular layer, it contains satellite cells and basket cells. Along with these two types of cells, it contains dendrites of the Purkinje cells. These are the dendrites of the Purkinje cells. Clearly. And the inner granular layer, it contains granular cells, it contains Golgi cells. Along with those, it contains axons of Purkinje cells. So this Purkinje cell, it gives an axon. Clearly, it are which are contained in the inner granular layer. So this is the structure of the cerebellum. This is also the histological diagram of the cerebellum. If we look at the diagram, figure 6.12 A and B, this is the histological diagram of the cerebellum. What do we see in this histological diagram? First of all, we see Purkinje cells. Purkinje cells here right now. These are the flask-shaped cells in the in the intermediate Purkinje layer. And outside this Purkinje layer, we have the outer molecular layer. Outer molecular layer. This is the outer molecular layer with its cells, basket and the satellite cells. And inside the Purkinje layer, we have the granular layer. This is the granular layer. As you can see, the granular layer clearly. This granular layer containing granular cells and the Golgi cells. So this is the histological structure. Histological structure: outer molecular layer and inner granular layer. Purkinje cells are present in between the outer molecular layer and the inner granular layer, and uniform structure, that's homotypical structure of cerebellum. So this is the histological diagram given in the BDC. This is the structure. Clearly, this is the handmade diagram. This is the handmade diagram. If you look closely at this diagram, these are the flask-shaped Purkinje cells. Clearly, and this is the outer molecular layer, which contains satellite cells and the basket cells. Clearly, and we have here this layer right here. This is the granular layer, which contains this cells. Clearly, this is the granular cells, and it also contains the Golgi cells. It also contains Golgi cells. Here is the Golgi cell. Clearly, so this is the handmade diagram, histological connections of the cerebellar neurons. Here is right. This is the diagram B6, figure 6.12. Figure 6.12. So far is clear. Now we will talk about an important point, that is the sensory fibers of cerebellum. This topic is related to our structure. So we have the sensory fibers of cerebellum. Cerebellum. Sensory fibers, two types of cerebellum receive two types of fibers. So cerebellum receives two types of fibers. So these sensory fibers of cerebellum, which are received by the cerebellum, are of two types. They can be climbing fiber, they can be mossy fiber. So let's first talk about the climbing fiber. This climbing fiber, it it comes from inferior olivary nucleus. Inferior olivary nucleus. Where is this inferior olivary nucleus? It's located in medulla. It's located in medulla. So, and then they go to one Purkinje cell, and then they go to one Purkinje cell. Purkinje cell. So consider this. This is the diagram. This is the structure of the cerebellum. This is the climbing fiber. Clearly, climbing fiber. They come from inferior olivary nucleus. Inferior olivary nucleus, and then they go to one Purkinje cell. They go to one Purkinje cell. So what is this? This is a climbing fiber. Climbing fiber. Clearly, now we'll talk about the mossy fiber. Now we'll talk about the mossy fiber. Mossy fiber. These are the sensory fibers of cerebellum. Number first is the climbing fiber. It comes from the inferior olivary nucleus of the opposite side, which is located in medulla, and then it goes to one only single Purkinje cell. Clearly, now we'll talk about the mossy fiber. This mossy fiber, clearly, it forms cerebelloglomerulus. Glomerulus. Clearly, with granular granular and Golgi cells. What is the cerebelloglomerulus? I will show you. Consider this. This is the mossy fiber. This is the mossy fiber coming. Mossy fiber. This mossy fiber gives its connections to the Golgi cells as well as to the granular cells. Clearly, this mossy fiber gives its connection to the Golgi cells and as well as to the granular cells. As a result, they form a structure right there. That is cerebelloglomerulus. Glomerulus. So this mossy fiber comes, it uses its axons to the Golgi cells as well as to the granular cells. Clearly? Clear? So mossy fiber forms cerebelloglomerulus that we saw right now. Clearly? Then from granular cell, a T fiber originate. A T-shaped fiber originate. A T-shaped fiber originate. Which anastomose with a large number of Purkinje cells. Which anastomose with a large number of Purkinje cells. So mossy fiber, it comes, it uses connections to the Golgi cells as well as to the granular cells, forming cerebelloglomerulus. Then from the granular cell, clearly a T-shaped fiber appear. A T-shaped fiber arise. This is the T-shaped fiber, and this T-shaped fiber, from granular cell, a fiber arises which is T-shaped. This is the T-shaped fiber, and this T-shaped fiber gives its connections to the lot of to many Purkinje cells. Here is a distinction. This climbing fiber, which comes from the inferior olivary nucleus, gives its connection to just one Purkinje cell, whereas this mossy fiber, which comes from cerebelloglomerulus rosette formation with Golgi and granular cells, then from the granular cells, a T-shaped fiber goes and it anastomose and gives its connection to the many Purkinje cells. Clearly, so this is about the sensory fibers of the cerebellum, which are two: climbing fiber and mossy fiber. So far what we discussed, first we discussed the structure of the cerebellum is homotypical. Then we talked about the 5 neurons of the cerebellum, among which 4 are inhibitory, which one is excitatory. Then we talked about the 3 layers of the cerebellum, clearly outer molecular, intermediate, and the inner granular, and the different cells in it. Then we talked about the climbing fiber and the mossy fiber. Clearly, so this completes the structure of cerebellum. One more thing that I should mention here, one last point. It will take just 1 minute. Clearly, we know from the previous lectures, this is the structure of cerebellum. This is the medulla. This is pons. This is midbrain. These 3 together are called as brain stem. And this is the 4th ventricle, and this is the cerebellum. Cerebellum. clearly. So this cerebellum is connected with the brainstem. The cerebellum is connected with the brainstem. This cerebellum is connected with the brainstem. Cerebellum connected with brainstem with the help of cerebellar peduncles. With the help of cerebellar peduncles. With the help of cerebellar peduncles. Clearly. So this cerebellum is connected with the midbrain, which is a part of brainstem. The cerebellum is connected with the pons. The cerebellum is connected with the medulla. The connection between the cerebellum and the midbrain. So the cerebellum is connected with the midbrain. The cerebellum is connected with the pons. The cerebellum is connected with the medulla, which these three forms brainstem. So this connection between cerebellum and midbrain is called superior cerebellar peduncle. This connection with the cerebellum and pons is called a middle cerebellar peduncle, and the connection between the cerebellum and the medulla is called as the inferior cerebellar peduncle, or in other words we can say inferior cerebellar peduncle connects cerebellum with medulla, middle cerebellar peduncle connects cerebellum with pons, and the superior cerebellar peduncle connects cerebellum with midbrain. Clearly, so cerebellar peduncles, what are these are the connections between the cerebellum and the midbrain. Thank you very much. Your Dr. Uwe here. Keep revising, keep studying, work hard. That's the only way.